Tariffs are creating a wave of economic uncertainty that's shaking both business and leisure travel between Europe and the United States. Fewer Americans are flying abroad, and fewer international tourists are heading to the States. Why bother, many ask, when they're just flying into Trump's America, a country now facing fresh problems from overseas? International visits to the United States have seen a dramatic drop, at least 14% lower than a year ago. Shocking images of nearly empty planes are all over social media. Many international travelers are flying into the United States with rows of seats to themselves. At the very beginning of 2025, visits from Canadians plunged 35%, marking the worst decline since 9/11. Social media shows gas stations in Buffalo, Detroit, and Seattle eerily empty of Canadian license plates. But this isn't just about images. $30 billion in foreign visitor spending has already drained from the United States economy since 2021, and experts warn that figure could increase 6 times before the year ends unless trends reverse. This isn't about COVID anymore. The blame now lies in a pileup of tariffs, sky-high inflation, and retaliatory diplomacy, turning the once-coveted American dream into a destination to skip. As Washington stretches itself too thin around the globe, international travelers are feeling the cold and walking away. If this continues, the tourism industry, once employing millions, could face its longest and most painful decline in decades. From Paris to Sao Paulo, one explanation keeps surfacing. Travelers don't want the hassle. Tight border security, frequent alerts, and escalating tariff wars between Washington and its allies are all to blame. Europe's top travel organizations are now urging people to rethink American vacations. Ottawa has raised its travel warning, pointing to long, intense questioning at United States borders. Tourism-dependent cities are already feeling the sting. New York, the country's #1 tourist hub, slashed its visitor forecast to 64 million, down 4.5%. International guests may fall to 12.1 million, which is a 6.2% drop. Hotels in Manhattan report that despite stable occupancy, profits are falling below zero due to rising costs. In Las Vegas, April visitor numbers fell 5.1%, according to the city's Visitors Authority. Casino giants like Wynn and Caesars have already begun laying off seasonal workers, even as summer approaches. Even Disney World in Florida, normally bursting at the seams, has cut back shows due to crowd levels sinking to 5 out of 10 from 7 last year, and average wait times now hover around 36 minutes. Experts fear this decline could feed on itself. Fewer travelers mean less revenue, which forces companies to cut costs, leading to a worse experience that drives even more visitors away. If the diplomatic heat and tariff hikes persist, America's tourism slump could last for years, threatening over 15 million jobs that depend on foreign tourists. The world is stepping back, and the question is whether Washington will roll out the welcome mat or keep building tariff barriers that drive travelers and their dollars away. Is this economic gamble worth the risk? High tariffs are quietly choking the life out of America's tourism engine. Since the tariff wars reignited in early 2025, the U.S. effective tariff rate has shot up to almost 30%, nearly 10 times higher than before the trade conflict. A Center for Economic Policy research study shows that even without new tariffs, today's baseline forces travelers to pay more, for everything from checked bags to airport lattes. Every imported good, from Italian desserts to Mexican spirits, now carries a steep markup. If a trip to the East Coast costs hundreds more than it did last year, many European families decide it's better, and honestly cheaper, to just stay home and stream Netflix. Even visa costs are up. Since June 2023, a B1, B2 visa has risen from $160 to $185, and there's talk of a $1,000 fast-track fee for priority interviews. Critics say this fee may not even be legal, as it far exceeds the real cost of service. Add to that fuel surcharges. Airlines are now passing on the cost of tariffs on steel, aluminum, and aircraft parts directly to passengers. According to Morgan Stanley, the average round-trip ticket from London to New York has already risen 12% in the first quarter of 2025. But higher prices don't mean smoother travel. Travelers from Germany, France, and Australia are reporting phone checks and laptop searches at the gate. The ACLU calls it a legal gray area. The Guardian reports U.S. border agents demanding device passwords without specific warrants, leaving travelers embarrassed and frustrated. In Australia, the Foreign Ministry has updated its advisory 3 times in 6 weeks, warning that U.S. border agents have full authority to deny entry for vague reasons. Canada has also warned that its citizens may be detained without entry, urging travelers who hate trouble to consider other destinations. What started as a trade war has now become an image war. Canada is encouraging citizens to stay north, spend north, offering 10% cash back on card purchases in places like Montreal. German tour operators are promoting cut-price Mediterranean vacations with the slogan, "No tricky visas, just sunshine." Even Mexico is pushing a tourism reset with signs reading Vacation sin aranceles, vacation without tariffs, aimed at Canadians and Europeans who want an easy trip. And the fallout is everywhere. According to the U.S. Travel Association, bookings from Latin America are down 14%, and European bookings are crashing at levels not seen since 2008. The irony? Every new tariff meant to protect American jobs is hurting the very cities that rely on tourist money. Western Europeans are turning away. Broadway is now slapping on last-minute 30% ticket hikes, and souvenir shops in Times Square say "I love New York" shirts are gathering dust. Disney World has lost nearly 3,000 international ticket sales per day compared to last year, and just canceled a major daytime parade to cut costs. In Las Vegas, Sands Corp shelved a $2 billion expansion plan due to the uncertainty. Tourism used to be about cultural exchange, person-to-person diplomacy. Today it's a maze of costs, visa stress, and cold welcomes. Unless the U.S. changes direction fast, the skies will stay empty, and each vacant seat will act as a quiet, costly receipt-stamped tariff. Just look at the Commerce Department's dashboard. In March 2025, Western European arrivals dropped another 17%, a collapse not seen since the COVID freeze. In New York, the Comptroller's June report says Times Square traffic is still 18% below 2019, and sales maps once bright red have faded to yellow. Even the New York Post had to admit the city's tourism industry is nodding off. Hotel bookings are falling and visitors are stuck at border checks. Yet these statistics barely scratch the surface. A glance at JFK's departure board shows rows of empty seats, steep discounts in business class, and sluggish foot traffic. Broadway is bleeding. In just 3 months, 17 shows have shut down early. Playbill called it the worst closure wave of the decade. Most recently, Smash closed after just 84 performances, burning through $20 million in investment. 0 Tonys. A crushing blow to Broadway's comeback dreams. When the stage lights go off, so does the economy built around them. From street vendors to rideshare drivers, the wave of theater-goers vanishes, and with them, the night's income. Further south, Orlando, America's theme park capital, is getting hit by a double punch, post-COVID travel fatigue and rising tariffs. Visit Orlando proudly shared that 6.13 million international tourists visited in 2023, including a record-breaking 1.22 million Canadians. But now, Orlando Weekly reports that by the first quarter of 2025, international travel into Florida was already down from the first quarter of 2024. If that trend holds, Central Florida alone could lose 1.2 million guests, basically the size of Dallas. The U.S. Travel Association warns that just a 10% decline in Canadian visitors has already slashed $2.1 billion and 14,000 jobs across the country. In Orlando, where tourism and hospitality jobs dominate, the outlook is even worse. Nearly 20,000 part-time hotel and restaurant workers could be out of work if things don't turn around. On the West Coast, San Francisco's convention economy is also faltering. In October 2024, the San Francisco Business Times reported that the American College of Surgeons and 2 major science organizations canceled their 2029 conferences, wiping over 100,000 booked room nights at Moscone Center. According to the San Francisco Chronicle, those were just the beginning. More than a dozen events, mainly from the Asia-Pacific region, have backed out, citing rising costs and street safety concerns. That loss of hotel bookings alone amounts to nearly $600 million in MIC revenue, about 1 year's salary for over 8,000 workers in the conference and event sector. The common thread? International tourists spend 7 to 8 times more than U.S. travelers. According to the U.S. Travel State of the Industry report, each international guest brings in nearly $4,000 compared to only $650 from a domestic visitor. So even if airports still look busy with Americans traveling for work or family, the big spending tourists, those fueling souvenir shops, fine dining, and Broadway theaters, are disappearing. If visa crackdowns, 30% tariffs, and security warnings aren't eased in the next 18 months, the U.S. Travel Association says the $30 billion loss since 2021 could balloon 6 times over before 2025 ends. And with every billion lost, thousands of seasonal jobs vanish. While the U.S. tourism sector struggles, other countries are fighting back hard. Canada launched its Stay North campaign, an all-out marketing blitz playing non-stop on CBC, tagged #SpendaThere. Its message? Don't let your travel dollars support the economy that hurt us. The Conference Board of Canada predicts that if even 1/3 of travelers cancel U.S. trips, that campaign could keep nearly $9 billion inside Canada's tourism industry this year alone. Statistics: Canada shows southbound car travel down 35.2% year over year, the 4th straight monthly decline and the worst drop since the SARS outbreak in 2003. In effect, Ottawa has launched a tourism counterstrike, a soft, economic blow hitting U.S. cities like Buffalo, Detroit, and Seattle. The impact is immediate. Air Canada, once reliant on the Toronto-New York route, has now cut 4 U.S. connections from its winter 2025 to 2026 schedule, redirecting aircraft to Cancun, Punta Cana, and Caribbean resorts with lower taxes and fewer entry hassles. That move alone eliminates tens of thousands of seats to the U.S. monthly, signaling to WestJet and Porter that the American market is no longer worth the trouble. Meanwhile, Europe isn't staying quiet. France's Le Monde ran a blazing June headline, "Revenge on America," just after Paris warned travelers to be cautious with U.S. bookings. At the same time, Der Spiegel ran a piece titled "Dollars in Doubt," citing 3 major deterrents: higher visa costs, more intense phone searches, and the threat of sudden border closures if trade spats escalate. Buried beneath the headlines was data from the Pew Research Center showing French approval of the U.S. below 30% and German favorability at just 35%, the lowest since surveys began in 2003, and 20 points down in 1 year. That sentiment shift shows up on Europe's flight boards. Money Tourism reports that Lufthansa has quietly reduced Frankfurt-New York flights, cut off Miami and Chicago, and sent planes instead to booming routes like Osaka, Bangkok, and Bengaluru. Air France dropped Seattle, scaled back Washington, and KLM reduced flights to San Francisco and Boston, moving capacity to Bangkok and Istanbul instead. According to Oxford Economics, U.S.-bound bookings from Europe for summer 2025 are down 10%, while travel to the EU, Mexico, and Caribbean is up double digits. In short, travelers aren't vanishing. They're just spending their money where it's easier to go. Meanwhile, the U.S. government has barely responded. Just press briefings insisting everything is under control, but the numbers say otherwise. The U.S. Travel Association estimates international tourists still bring $4,000 per trip, compared to the $650 that domestic tourists spend. So every flight Lufthansa or Air Canada pulls out of is not just a missed fare, it's a lost hotel stay, Broadway ticket, steak dinner, and service worker tip. While Canada keeps $9 billion at home and Asia and the Caribbean attract premium travelers, cities like Times Square, Disney World, and San Francisco's convention centers suffer. And here's the big twist. A tourism weapon doesn't need a vote or a missile. Just a hashtag like #StayNorth or a few headlines about visa delays and canceled flights is enough to wipe tens of billions off the U.S. economy. If Washington keeps tightening borders and pushing tariffs, these soft economic attacks will intensify, because other countries now realize hurting U.S. tourism hurts deeper than any import tax. Once top-spending travelers from Europe and Canada walk away, winning them back is far harder than lifting a tariff. Imagine the U.S. tourism budget as a bucket domestic travelers add a few cups, but international ones used to pour in like Niagara Falls. The U.S. Travel Association's latest report says foreign guests spend 8 times more than Americans. And according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average U.S. household spent just $926 on travel in 2020, barely the cost of a cheap Paris-New York ticket. With the home market this week, a drop in foreign visitors cuts straight through the heart of the U.S. services trade, and that wound is growing. New U.S. travel data shows international arrivals fell 14% in March 2025. Each 1% drop equals about $1.8 billion in lost export earnings. Keep going like this. and the country stands to lose $21 billion in 2025 from tourism alone. Fortune magazine's forecast is worse. A long-term slowdown could erase $23 billion in GDP and 230,000 jobs in the next 12 months, mostly in hospitality roles that can't be automated. Losing money is one thing, but losing trust is harder to fix. Pew's 2024 global survey shows international approval of the U.S. falling to 54%, a record low since before the pandemic. Concerns over visa delays, phone searches, and economic retaliation are making the U.S. look like a difficult and unwelcoming place to visit. This isn't just about fewer selfies at the Statue of Liberty. It's also about canceled student programs, academic summits moved to Tokyo or Toronto, and broken cultural ties. And here's the hard truth. Once trust is lost, no amount of marketing can win it back overnight. Yes, French and German tourists may spend $4,000 per visit, but they now have easier, friendlier choices, from Portugal's beaches to Vietnam's lantern-lit streets, all without visa delays or high entry fees. If Washington keeps throwing up trade barriers and border checks, the revenue hole and reputation damage will only grow. And when the most profitable tourists turn away, that big bucket will be left with just a few drops, nowhere near enough to support America's 15 million tourism jobs. The clock is ticking. If U.S. policymakers refuse to act, today's tourism dip could become a $200 billion storm by year's end, says Oxford Economics. That's equal to 3 years of the DOT budget, or enough to build 4 major airports from the ground up. But the biggest loss isn't money. It's global goodwill. Tariffs can be repealed, but when travelers feel burned, they vote with their passports. And getting them back? That's a whole different challenge. America's soft power, its people, places, and ideas, once delivered a 7% GDP dividend. Today, that advantage is bleeding away. Will Washington de-escalate or let the U.S. disappear from the world's vacation map? What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments, smash that subscribe, and hit the bell to stay tuned as we track the economic battles reshaping America's future.